My family didn't invite me at Thanksgiving until my sister's husband walked into my office. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I carried a belief deep inside me that family was supposed to be a shelter, a place of warmth, a place where I could walk in with tired steps and still feel loved. I grew up giving everything I could to them. I helped my parents with chores. I supported my siblings in school. I stayed up late when they were sick. I saved my pocket money to buy them gifts on holidays. I did everything with a full heart and without expecting anything in return, but slowly and quietly life began revealing to me a truth. I never wanted to face that love is not always returned equally, and that sometimes the people you call family can make you feel more alone than any stranger ever could. I never noticed the distance growing at first. It started with small comments, small gatherings, small inside jokes that I was not part of. I brushed them aside thinking they were accidental. I thought maybe they forgot to include me. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they just assumed I would be working because I was the responsible one, the hard-working one, the one who always had things under control. I thought giving them excuses was better than believing something was wrong, but time has a way of uncovering what we try to hide. And one day, the truth stood right in front of me. Without a filter and without mercy, it was the morning of Thanksgiving when I woke up to a quiet, empty apartment. The city outside was filled with the sound of celebration, people carrying bags of food, families laughing, cars driving to warm homes. I sat on my couch and opened my phone expecting nothing special. I had stopped hoping for messages, yet somewhere inside me a tiny spark still wished maybe someone in my family would reach out. Maybe my sister would call. Maybe my mother would ask, "Are you coming home?" But as soon as the screen lit up, everything inside me froze. I saw a series of pictures posted by my sister and then shared by my mother, my brother, and even relatives. The entire dining table was set with warm, golden colors. The turkey shining in the center, the glasses filled, the candles glowing. My family was sitting together, smiling, laughing, holding plates, taking group selfies. I looked at each face carefully, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, her husband, my cousins, all of them together for a perfect Thanksgiving dinner, and the one face missing was mine. Nobody had invited me. Nobody had even told me the plan. Nobody had written a single line saying, "We are meeting today. Do you want to join it?" Was not forgetfulness. It was not an accident. It was a choice, a decision, and it cut deeper than any wound I had ever felt. I stared at the pictures again and again, hoping maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a message, maybe a call I had overlooked, but my phone was silent. No notifications, no missed calls, nothing. I felt the weight of years crushing me, all the moments I had been present for, all the times I arrived early to help cook, all the times I cleaned after gatherings, all the times I gave without expecting anything back. They had erased me without hesitation, as if I did not exist that evening. I did not cry. I just sat in the silence, listening to the clock tick on the wall. The sound felt louder with each passing minute, reminding me of the space between me and the people I once believed would stand with me forever. I tried calling my mother, but she did not pick up. I tried messaging my sister, but she left it unseen. I lay down on my couch with a blanket around me and wondered how a person becomes invisible to the people she loves. How does a family decide that one member is no longer needed? Does it happen slowly, or does it happen all at once? The next morning I walked into my office with tired eyes and a heavy heart. I forced myself to act normal. I greeted my team, I turned on my computer, I tried focusing on emails, but my mind drifted back again and again to those images, the laughter, the plates, the warm light, while my apartment had been so dark and so cold. I took long breaths, trying to bury the ache, hoping work would distract me, but grief has a strange way of staying with you. It sits quietly in the corner of your chest, and every breath feels heavier because of it. Thought the day would pass slowly and painfully, but something happened that changed everything. Something I never could have predicted. The door of my office opened without a knock, and to my shock, my sister's husband, Daniel, walked inside. He had never visited me at work, never even asked where my office was, yet there he stood, breathless, as if he had rushed his way through the entire building. His eyes looked worried, conflicted, almost desperate. He closed the door gently behind him and came closer, then sat in the chair opposite me. His hands were shaking slightly, and I could see he was struggling to find the right words. I waited quietly, unsure of what was happening, unsure of why he, of all people, had come to see me in such a state. Then, after a long breath, he looked at me and said he needed to tell me something, something that had been burning inside him since Thanksgiving night, something he could no longer keep hidden. My heart tightened. I did not know what he was about to say, but I could feel that whatever it was, it carried weight. It carried pain, and it was connected to the night I had been excluded from the room, felt smaller. The air thicker. I looked at him and nodded, asking him silently to continue. He leaned forward and said he had made a mistake by staying silent that night. He said he watched my entire family laugh and celebrate, but beneath the joy there was a shade of cruelty. They kept talking about me, mocking me, judging me, criticizing my life, my choices, my independence. He said he felt uncomfortable at first, then ashamed, and finally sick to his stomach. He said they treated me as if I were an outsider, an inconvenience, someone who did not belong. He said he tried to speak up, but they shut him down, told him it was family business and not his place to defend me. When he said those words, I felt something break inside me, not loudly, but quietly, like a thin string snapping after carrying too much weight for too long, and he was not finished. Daniel did not stop speaking after that first confession. Instead, he took a deeper breath, as if gathering the strength to expose the truth he had been carrying. Alone since Thanksgiving night, he looked at me with an expression that held both guilt and frustration, and I could see in his eyes that whatever he had witnessed had shaken him far more than I could imagine. He said that the environment inside my parents' house that night was not a celebration, but a gathering, built on bitterness, judgment, and a strange sense of superiority that seemed to grow louder every time my name came up. He said they talked about my job, how I worked too much, how I thought too highly of my achievements, how I had changed since moving out, how I acted too independent, too strong, as if those qualities were flaws rather than the result of years of emotional neglect. He told me my sister mocked my quietness. My mother called me distant. My father said I always made everything about myself. My brother laughed and agreed, and the cousins nodded as if they knew me better than I knew myself. He said they tore me apart piece by piece, as if removing me from their narrative made their own identities shine brighter. As Daniel described their words, my chest felt tighter, not from shock, but from recognition. It was the same pattern I had experienced for years: subtle dismissals, small rejections, jokes that cut deeper than they seemed, to simple comments meant to place me below them, but hearing it all told openly by another witness, someone who had no reason to lie, felt like confirmation of everything I had tried to deny for so long. Daniel said he could not bear listening anymore. He said he tried to stand up for me once, twice, and again, but my family silenced him. Each time they told him he was causing tension, they said I would not care. They said I was too busy with my successful life to bother with them. They painted me as a villain in a story that had existed only in their minds. Then, as if humiliating me was not enough, they raised their glasses and toasted to family unity, a unity that apparently did not include me. When he told me that part, I felt something inside me shift, a quiet anger, a wounded strength rising slowly, like a tide, the kind of emotion that comes when your heart finally understands that it has been hurting for far too long. Daniel saw that in my eyes, and he lowered his voice, almost as if afraid his words might break me further. He said he walked out of the dinner, not because he was offended, but because he could not watch them celebrate after tearing me down so casually. He said he realized then that I did not just lose an invitation that night, I lost a family that did not value me. He reached into his pocket, took out a folded piece of paper, and placed it on my desk. He said it was something he found accidentally in the guest room drawer. Something that explained even more than the conversations. Something that revealed how long my family had been distancing themselves from me. I looked at the folded paper, hesitating for a moment before opening it, and what I saw inside sent a wave of cold shock through my body. Was a list written in my mother's handwriting, a list titled Thanksgiving. Planning, there were names of everyone attending, organized neatly with tasks and notes beside each name. My father would carve the turkey, my brother would bring drinks, my sister would decorate. My cousins would help in the kitchen, and then at the very bottom in small letters was a line that read, "Emily is too busy, do not mention I." Stared at that line for a long time, unable to breathe, unable to move. The words stung deeper than any insult. Too busy, do not mention, as if I were a burden, as if I were an afterthought, as if the family had already decided I did not belong. He had not shown it to me to hurt me. He had shown it because he believed I deserved to know the truth, the whole truth. Daniel sat quietly watching me process everything. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the paper back. It was strange how a single sentence could summarize years of emotional distance. It was even stranger how my mother, the woman who kissed my forehead each night as a child, wrote those words. With such certainty, Daniel leaned forward and said he had something else, something even heavier. He said the conversations at the dinner revealed pride, jealousy, resentment things. I never imagined my family felt toward me. He said they resented my independence, that I did not rely on them for money or decisions. They resented that I did not gossip with them, that I kept my personal life private, that I did not complain as loudly as they did. They resented that I worked hard, that I achieved things they believed I did not deserve. They resented that I moved out of the family home earlier than expected, that I built a life on my own terms. They mocked me for being quiet, for reading, for staying focused, for avoiding drama. He said they twisted every part of who I was into something negative. Closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle deep into my bones. It hurt, but it also brought clarity, a kind of clarity that feels like standing in cold rain after a long trapped a long trapped silence. I asked Daniel why he had come to tell me all this, why he had stepped away from his own family evening to confront a truth that was not even his burden. He looked at me and said that he had seen enough cruelty in life to know silence can sometimes be the worst crime. He said he respected me and that I deserved honesty, even if it came wrapped in pain. Then he revealed something that left me speechless. He said he believed my family had always known I saw through their manipulations, that I did not fall easily into their emotional patterns, that I kept boundaries they could not control, and because of that they needed someone to blame, someone to label as distant and difficult, someone to corner emotionally so they would not have to face their own flaws. And somehow that someone became me. Hearing that felt like a mirror held up to my whole life. The moments that once felt confusing now made sense. The times they excluded me, the times they questioned my choices, the times they made jokes about me, the times they forgot my birthday, the times they dismissed my efforts, the times they pretended I was overly sensitive. It was all part of a pattern, a slow erasure of my place in the family. Then said something I would never forget. He said, sometimes the person the family rejects is the one who breaks the cycle. He said maybe my strength, my silence, my independence frightened them more than my presence ever comforted them. He said I was not the problem. I was simply the truth, and some people cannot stand the truth, especially when it reflects their own insecurities. I looked out the window for a moment, watching the city move beneath the pale morning light. My heart was heavy, but a new emotion stirred within. In a quiet awakening, I asked Daniel what he thought I should do. He said only one thing: live for yourself, not for a family that chooses to dim your light. He said the next steps were mine to choose, and that healing begins the moment you stop waiting for people who never show up. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything he had revealed. It was painful and freeing at the same time, like cutting off a chain that had been digging into my skin for years. I realized I was no longer just grieving the loss of an invitation. I was grieving the loss of a family that had never truly seen me, and Daniel was not done yet. He said there was one more truth. I needed to hear something that would change everything about what I believed happened on Thanksgiving night. I never believed that one evening could shift the balance of an entire life. But that night proved me wrong because the moment my sister's husband walked out of my office, everything that followed began to move like a chain of falling dominoes, each knocking down the next, forcing the truth to uncover itself piece by piece, and I felt myself pulled into the center of a storm. I never expected the next morning. I walked into my office earlier than usual, my mind still spinning around the revelation. He had confessed the truth, the one truth I had deserved for years. My family had never invited me because they wanted to avoid the discomfort of seeing the daughter who stood on her own, the one who made no demands, and the one they assumed needed no love, and yet his voice kept echoing in my memory, telling me that I was not unwanted. I was simply too strong for them to understand. I sat at my desk and looked at the framed degrees, the awards, the contracts I had fought for and earned with sleepless nights and relentless effort, and for the first time, instead of pride, I felt a weight, a heaviness, because none of these achievements had ever filled the empty space that had always remained like a cold hollow inside me. A space shaped exactly like family. I leaned back and closed my eyes, remembering how many holidays I had spent alone with coffee and silent movies, how many birthdays had passed where the only wish I made was to feel seen even once, and how every year I convinced myself that it did not matter, but deep down it always had, and the truth of that hurt later that day. I received a message from my sister, short, hesitant, and fragile, like she was unsure if she even deserved to be. In my inbox, she wrote that her husband had told her everything, and she was sorry, truly sorry, for letting me slip away from the family, for letting others convince her that I was fine on my own, that I did not need the warmth that everyone else needed, and that she wanted to meet me alone without the noise, without the opinions, without the pressure. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart tightening, because even though a part of me longed to accept her apology, another part remembered the years of silence, the years of empty chairs, the years of waiting for something that never arrived, and I wondered if forgiveness was supposed to feel this heavy still. I agreed to meet her because the truth was, I needed closure. I needed to hear from her lips why they had treated me like a distant relative instead of a daughter, a sister, a part of their own blood. We met at a small cafe with soft lights and warm colors, a place that felt like a safe pocket between two storms. She walked in slowly, her shoulders tense, her eyes unsure. And for the first time I realized she looked older, more tired, more human than I had imagined. She sat down, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she took a deep breath and began to talk. She told me everything, how our parents believed that I was too ambitious, too different, how they felt uncomfortable around me because I always asked questions, because I always fought back, because I never accepted anything blindly, and because of that they decided to give love to the child who asked for it instead of the one who seemed capable of surviving without it. Listened, my chest rising and falling with a strange quiet ache, because everything she said felt like a truth I had always suspected, but hearing it aloud gave it shape, gave it weight, made it real, and it hurt more than I expected. I asked her why she had never tried to defend me, why she had allowed them to erase me from gatherings year after year, and she looked down like her guilt was too heavy to lift. She said she had grown up wanting to be accepted, wanting to be loved, and she feared that standing with me meant standing against them, and she was too afraid to risk losing the affection. She fought hard, for her honesty did not erase the pain, but it opened a door, a small, fragile door to understanding, and I felt something shift inside me, something soft, something warm, something I had once believed was lost. She reached across the table, her hand trembling, and she said she wanted things to change. She wanted me at every family dinner, every holiday, every celebration, and she wanted her children to know their aunt, not as a distant, successful figure, but as someone real, someone loving, someone they could run toy. Looked at her hand, and I felt tears forming, not from sorrow, but from a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Because after so many years of being shut out, the door was finally opening, and all I had to do was choose whether to walk through. Later that evening, when I reached my home, the quiet felt different, not empty, but waiting for a new beginning, waiting for a new chapter. And I realized that forgiveness was not about erasing pain. It was about choosing not to carry it forever. And so I sat down with my journal, the one habit I had kept since childhood, writing every thought, every feeling, every storm that lived inside me. And I wrote that maybe this time, maybe this year, maybe this new beginning was the one where I would not spend Thanksgiving alone again. Maybe this was the year I would reclaim the place that was always mine, but was never offered. The next few days passed with gentle shifts. My sister sent me pictures of her kids, telling me they were excited to meet me. My mother sent a short message asking if I was doing well, something she had never done before. And my father, even though he did not write, sent me a small gift, a gesture that felt new, strange, and uncertain, but still meaningful. But the most surprising moment came when my sister's husband visited my office again. He walked in with the same steady, calm presence, and he told me he had done what his conscience demanded. He had told them the truth, because he had seen the pain in my eyes, the pain I had never spoken, and he wanted to make things right, not for them, not even for himself, but for me, because he believed I deserved better. His words settled in my heart like soft snow, quiet but deeply felt, and I realized that sometimes kindness comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes change begins not with the people who hurt you, but with someone who sees your hurt and chooses to accede. As Thanksgiving approached, my sister informed me that the family was preparing something special, a gathering where they wanted to welcome me back, not as a stranger, not as a guest, but as someone they should have cherished all along. And even though I felt hesitant, uncertain, and slightly afraid, I agreed to attend because healing required stepping into places that once felt painful. In the morning of Thanksgiving, I stood before the mirror wearing a simple, warm outfit. Something comfortable, something soft, something that made me feel like myself. And for the first time in years, I felt hope, a quiet, steady hope blooming inside me, like a fragile flower finding sunlight after years of shade. When I reached the house, the same house that once held memories of silence and exclusion, the door opened before I even knocked, and my sister rushed out smiling with eyes that shimmered with emotion. She hugged me tightly, holding me as if she feared I would disappear, and I felt something inside me finally break, not in pain, but in release. Inside the house, the family turned toward me, their expressions unsure, hopeful, guilty, and hopeful again. And for a long moment, we all stood frozen in a silence that spoke louder than words, a silence filled with years of distance and now the possibility of closeness. My mother approached me slowly, her voice trembling as she said she was glad I came. My father nodded awkwardly, his eyes softening in a way I had never seen, and the children ran toward me, calling Auntie with pure, innocent joy that melted something deep inside me. And in that moment, surrounded by people who had once shut me out but now stood with open arms, I realized that life had given me a second chance, not to change the past, but to rebuild the future. And took a deep breath, letting the warmth fill me, letting the healing begin, letting the love return in gentle, slow waves. This Thanksgiving was the first one where I felt seen, where I felt wanted, where I felt like I belonged, not because I had proven myself or achieved anything, but simply because I was me, and that was enough. And as the evening settled with laughter and stories and soft music, I knew this was not the end of my journey. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, the chapter where I was no longer the forgotten one, where I no longer sat alone, where family no longer meant pain, but a slow, fragile, beautiful rediscovery of connection. This time I was ready for it, ready to step into the light, ready to reclaim what was always mine, ready to write the rest of my story with strength, forgiveness, and quiet, undeniable courage. The days after Thanksgiving felt different in a quiet, gentle way, like the air around me had shifted, carrying a new softness, a new warmth, something I had not felt in years. And every morning when I woke up, I realized that my heart no longer felt as heavy as it once did. The years of silence had left scars, but now those scars were slowly turning into places where light could enter and I was learning to breathe differently, not in survival, but in calm. Acceptance, my sister began visiting me. More often, sometimes with her children, sometimes alone, and every visit felt like one more stitch. Repairing a fabric that had been torn for far too long once during a late afternoon. She arrived with 2 cups of warm tea, and without saying much, she sat next to me on my couch and we watched the soft glow of the sunset through my window. The silence between us was no longer filled with distance, but with something peaceful, something healing, and I realized that sometimes reconciliation does not need loud apologies or dramatic moments. Sometimes it grows quietly like a seed watered with presence. One evening, she told me that our parents wanted to meet me properly, not in the chaotic holiday rush, not surrounded by a crowd, but slowly, honestly, and face to face. And even though a part of me wanted to avoid reopening old wounds, another part of me understood that this step was necessary. Because true healing required confronting the places where the pain had first begun. So I agreed, and a few days later, I drove to their house, a house that once made me feel small, unseen, and unheard. But this time, when I stood at the door, felt different, stronger, grounded in my own worth. And the moment my mother opened the door, her eyes filled with something fragile, something like regret, something like love that had finally found its way through years of pride and misunderstanding. She invited me inside with a trembling voice, and my father stood in the living room, awkward and unsure, his hands clasped together as if he did not know how to begin. And for a long moment, we all simply stood there, breathing in the thick, heavy silence, until finally my father spoke, his voice low and unfamiliar. He said he was sorry for not understanding me, for mistaking my strength as a sign that I needed nothing, for assuming that ambition meant independence from love. My mother added that she had always admired me secretly, but she had never known how to express it without feeling like she was failing the rest of the family. She said she worried that if she praised me too much, my sister would feel overshadowed, and so she tried to balance things, but in doing so, she had pushed me away more than she realized. Their words did not erase the years I had lost, but they softened the ache, and I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest, because this was the moment I had needed all along. Not perfection, not a flawless family, not a rewound past, but acknowledgement, truth, and a willingness to grow. Eventually, we sat together at the table where countless dinners had once passed without my presence. And this time, we shared stories, memories, questions, confessions, and as the evening unfolded, I saw my parents not as the flawless figures I once wished them to be, but as imperfect humans shaped by fear, by their upbringing, by their own insecurities. And for the first time, I allowed myself to forgive them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The next weeks brought even more unexpected shifts. My mother's messages grew warmer. My father would call me, even if he had nothing important to say, just to hear my voice, and my sister involved me in family plans as if I'd always been part of them. And each moment rewrote a piece of my past, creating new memories to replace the empty ones. But the biggest change came from within me, because for the first time, I began to let myself accept love without feeling like I had to earn it, without feeling like I had to prove my worth. And I realized how exhausting it had been to carry the belief that I had to be perfect to be seen. The truth was, I only needed to be myself. And we noticed the change. My coworkers said I seemed lighter, more present, more alive. And I found myself smiling more often, not the polite, practiced smile I usually wore, but a real one that came from a place that was finally healing. One afternoon, my sister's husband visited my office again. Not because of any urgent issue, but simply to check on me. And when he sat down across from me, he said something that stayed with me. He said that family is not defined by the years they get right, but by the moments when they choose to correct what they had done wrong. And those moments, he said, are the ones that rebuild everything. His words echoed in my mind long after he left, and I realized he was right, because even though my family had failed me in the past, they were choosing to show up now, genuinely, honestly, and consistently. And that meant more than the years of silence that were slowly fading into the background like a distant shadow as the season changed and winter settled in softly. I felt a sense of stillness within me, a calm I had never known, and I found myself thinking about the future, not with fear, not with resentment, but with gentle curiosity. Where would this new beginning lead? What would the next chapters of my life hold? What kind of bonds might grow now that the soil between us had finally been cleared of old hurt? One night while sitting by my window watching the quiet snowfall, I wrote in my journal again, my words flowing freely like a stream released from a blocked path. I wrote that healing is not a destination, but a journey. A journey, walked with courage, patience, and steady open-heartedness, and that perhaps the greatest strength a person can possess is not independence, but the ability to rise after years of being unseen and still choose to love us. I closed the journal. I felt a peace settle over me like a soft blanket, and I knew this was no longer the story of a forgotten daughter. This was the story of a woman who found her voice, a family who found their way back, and a heart that learned to open again without fear. And so part 4 was not an ending, but another sunrise, another gentle shift, another reminder that life, even after the deepest loneliness, still has room for love, growth, and connection. As winter began to fade and the first notes of spring quietly touched the edges of the world, I felt a change inside me more clearly than ever before, not a sudden dramatic shift, but a slow, warm unfolding like the heart I had kept locked for so many years was finally learning how to breathe again, how to trust again, and how to stand without the old weight of loneliness pressing against it. Life had taken a shape I never imagined during those long years when I spent holidays alone or when I worked late nights in silence, convincing myself that success would fill the empty spaces left by absent love. But now things were different, not perfect, not healed in every corner, but different, and that difference was enough to build hope from my parents had settled into a new rhythm with me. They called often, sometimes too often, asking if I had eaten, or if I reached home safely, or if I would visit them on the weekend, and there were moments when their new softness made my chest tighten. With something unfamiliar, a mixture of warmth and grief for the years we had lost, but I welcomed it because this time they were trying not out of obligation, but out of real intention. My sister continued to show up, to making sure our bond grew stronger, steadier, and more rooted than it ever had when we were younger. Some days she would bring her kids to my office, and they would run around laughing, filling the space with a kind of joy I had forgotten how to feel. I watched them with a quiet smile, thinking of how simple the love of children is, genuine, pure, and without judgment, something adults forget far too often. One afternoon, my niece climbed into my lap and told me she missed me when I was not around, and her small voice, her tiny hands, and her honest heart cracked something inside me open, and I hugged her tightly, feeling a warmth that felt like a piece of my own childhood returning to me, offering comfort I had never received but was now learning to give. Work also began to feel different. The pressure remained, the deadlines, the meetings, the decisions, all still there, but I no longer carried them alone like a shield I hid behind. Instead, I felt balanced, grounded in a way that let me breathe even through the busy hours, and my colleagues noticed. They said I seemed more alive, more connected, more human, and their words made me realize how long I had hardened myself just to survive. One late evening, as I was finishing a proposal in my office, my sister's husband knocked on the door again and stepped inside with his usual calm presence. He sat down and looked at me with an expression that held both pride and relief. He said he had watched me transform these past months, and he wanted me to know that. He admired my strength, but he admired my softness even more, because softness after years of pain was not a weakness, it was a victory. His words stayed with me long after he left, repeating softly in my mind like a gentle mantra, softness is a victory. And the more I embraced that truth, the more complete I felt, as if parts of me I never allowed to exist were finally stepping into the light. As spring settled in with blooming trees and warm breezes, my family decided to have a gathering, a small one not tied to any holiday, just a dinner to celebrate togetherness, something we had not truly experienced before, not in this form and not with this honesty. And when my sister asked me to come early to help her prepare, said yes without hesitation. When I arrived, her home smelled of warm bread, spices, and laughter, and she greeted me with a hug that held no guilt, no apology, just genuine love. We cooked together, moving around the kitchen like two people who had spent years learning each other's rhythms. Even though we had not, we talked about childhood memories, some painful, some funny, and through every story, I felt us rewiring the past, replacing old wounds with new understanding. When the rest of the family arrived, we sat together in a way we never had before, every face open, every heart willing, and for the first time I felt like I belonged, not because I had achieved something or proved something, but because they finally saw me not as the strong one, who needed nothing, but as a daughter, as a sister, as a human with emotions and a heart that had once been deeply hurt and was now quietly healing. As the night grew deeper, my mother placed her hand on mine gently and said she was proud of me, not for my success, but for the woman I had become. Her voice trembled with sincerity, and I felt tears rise, not from pain, but from the simple truth that I had waited my whole life to hear those words, and in that moment, I accepted them fully, without questioning them, without doubting if I deserved them, and they settled in my heart like a long overdue answer later. That night, my father walked me to my car, something he had not done in years, maybe ever. He stood there in the cool air, his voice unsteady as he said that if he could go back, he would change everything. And though I knew the past could not be rewritten, his willingness to say it mattered more than the apology itself, because it showed that he finally understood the depth of the hurt and the value of what he almost lost. When I drove home, the soft glow of streetlights passing one by one, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. A peace that came from knowing that healing is not linear and forgiveness is not a switch flipped in a single moment, but a choice made again and again with patience, courage, and gentleness. In the days that followed, I continued to write in my journal, capturing each new shift, each small act of love, each quiet healing moment. And as the pages filled, I realized this story, my story, was no longer about rejection or abandonment. It was about reclamation. Reclaiming my place, reclaiming my heart, reclaiming the love that had once felt out of reach. Months later, when Thanksgiving arrived again, the atmosphere was completely different. There was no silence, no distance, no emptiness. Instead, my family insisted that I sit at the center of the table, not as a guest, but as someone essential. And when my niece held my hand tightly throughout dinner, I felt anchored in a way I had never known before. As the evening came to an end and I stepped outside into the cool, gentle night air, I looked up at the sky where the stars were scattered softly, like tiny sparks of hope and weak. And I realized that life had led me through loneliness, not to break me, but to teach me what true belonging feels like once it finally arrives. And from that moment onward, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never again allow the shadows of the past to define me. I would walk forward with strength and softness, with courage and vulnerability, with forgiveness and unwavering self-worth, because this was my story, not of being forgotten, but of being found, not by others, but by myself. In that discovery, I finally understood that the greatest healing comes not when others change, but when we choose to open our hearts again to the possibility of love, connection, and a future brighter than the past we survived.